Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first virtual Art in Focus of 2026. We're going to be looking at one of the artworks in our new exhibition for which it stands, which rather unusually for the Fairfield University Art Museum, we are running in both of our exhibition galleries for the entire semester. So it opened in January and will run all the way through to July of 2026. So before we take a close look at our Childe Hassam painting that we're going to talk about today, I thought it might be nice to get a little bit of a sense for those of you who might be unfamiliar with what the show is trying to do. And the show is organized by and curated by Carrie Weber, who's the museum's director. And it is looking at more than 100 years of an artist taking on the American flag, responding to the American flag, celebrating it, criticizing it, everything in between. So what you're seeing here are the names of all of the artists who are represented in the show. There are 74 artworks, the earliest of which is the Childe Hassam painting from 1918 that we're going to talk about today. And it goes all the way up to a artwork we commissioned from Maria de Los Angeles that was completed in 2025. So it spans more than a century of American history, and as I mentioned, is occupying both of our galleries. And the show really does benefit if you see the whole thing. So if you just come to the Bellarmine Hall galleries, you're going to see roughly chronologically between 1918 to 1980. And if you go down to the Walsh Gallery, you'll see from about 1980 up until the present moment. We really do hope that you will come and see this wonderful exhibition. It is, as I said, on through July of 2026. And those of you who have not heard the fantastic word semi-quincentennial, the reason why Carrie 5 years ago thought of organizing a show that would look at artists responding to the American flag is because this is the 250th anniversary year leading up to, on July 4th, 2026, 250 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So our exhibition is but one part of a larger university-wide commemoration of that anniversary, which then joins both our state, our nation, and considering this major milestone for the United States. So we hope you will come and take a look through. I forgot the slide was in there, just giving you a few other shots of the Walsh Gallery. We are going to have a few moments together to talk about the very first artwork in the show. You can see it there underneath the exhibition title for which it stands, or we'll maneuver to be sort of facing it full on. And this photograph, which gives you a sense of the really lovely frame in which it travels. And I'm realizing, as I say this, those of you who've watched before probably know that the virtual Art in Focus is always preceded by an in-person Art in Focus. We had a very active group of 15 or 16 folks who were ready and excited to talk about all things Childe Hassam and New York. And one of the things I realized we never talked about was the frame of this picture, which if you can make out on the outer borders of the frame, it has a very lovely H medallion that has been carved into a number of places, obviously to commemorate the name of the artist whose work is within it. You can see it in a little bit better close up in this installation shot. So this painting has the title Italian Day, May 1918. Unsurprisingly, it comes to us from the year 1918. It is an oil on canvas painting, and it is on loan to our exhibition from Art Bridges. So many of you may have heard the name Art Bridges in connection with the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art that is in Arkansas, that was founded by members of the Walton family as a means of bringing a first-rate collection of American art to the people of Arkansas, as opposed to seeing it only in major metropolitan cities like New York and Chicago. When they created that museum, they made the very interesting choice to set up alongside it Crystal Bridges is the museum. Art Bridges is sort of the community-focused philanthropy arm. And one of the programs they run is a set of art objects, like this Childe Hassam painting, that are never really on display at the Mothership Museum. They are intended to be lent out to museums like ours to enrich temporary exhibitions, to bring new audiences. So Carrie had previously borrowed a Marsden Hartley painting of seagulls for a show we did in 2020 that was called Birds of the Northeast. And unfortunately, the world shut down with the COVID pandemic right after that show opened. So probably not a lot of you got to see it. That was the show for which we acquired our 3D camera. So if you went back to our past exhibitions, you could tour it using our 3D Matterport tour. But anyway, we had a relationship with Art Bridges, and when Carrie started planning a show that was surrounding the idea of the flag, she also knew that they had this Childe Hassam painting that they might be willing to lend us. So we're very grateful to Art Bridges for making that loan possible. And I feel like I should mention too, if you are wondering where the Matterport 3D tour of the exhibition for which it stands is, we opted not to produce one for this show. And the reason being, so many of the artworks are contemporary artworks that are under copyright or have very stringent controls over the reproduction of their images, that it would just be too challenging for us to try to shoot the Matterport while blurring out images that we don't have permission to reproduce or show. So unfortunately, there is not a 3D Matterport tour for this exhibition, as there have been for many others, but we will absolutely be making them again in the future when we are able. So this painting, we were saying in the gallery, and even this photograph, it really is not done justice by photographs. And those of you who have ever seen not just a Childe Hassam painting in person, but any painting by an artist where the surface texture plays such an active role in creating the mood of what you're looking at, a flat photograph really can never serve in the way looking at the painting in person can. So I really hope if you're in this area, you will take the opportunity to come in and take a peek. What we can do is, use some of our digital tools. And I put this in here because I'll go back for a second, try to just get a color sense. Here's the painting as it is installed in its frame in our gallery with the light shining down on it. And this is the high resolution image that Art Bridges shared with us 3 years ago when we finalized this loan. And one of the things that's always been interesting for me working in a museum is even if you have the highest resolution image, there are so many subtle changes that could be affected just by the sense of what the light setup was by the photographer when they shot that image, or the way the gold color of the frame, once you see it surrounded by the frame in the gallery, is going to subtly change your perceptions of the color. So that has just been very interesting to perceive. But this is the image that we have the highest resolution of, which is why this is the one I'm using some details from. And as always, if you have thoughts or comments, one of the first questions I asked people who came to our in-person event was how many people felt they had seen this painting or one quite like it at some point in time. And of course, a lot of people raised their hands. And some of them knew that Childe Hassam was well known for having done a whole series that is called his Flag series, where he took the opportunity of having a studio near Fifth Avenue in New York and producing the series of a variety of different depictions of Fifth Avenue bedecked with flags. Often in those paintings, it's the American flag throughout. There are many very famous iterations of that, including one that is in the White House collection that during President Obama's tenure, I know was hanging near his desk in the Oval Office. This one does not have, it's not exclusive to the American flag, although we immediately see one prominently to the upper right-hand edge. And the title probably gives us an idea as to why. And that is, this is called Italian Day, May 1918. So in this case, Childe Hassam is recording maybe the aftermath of a particular celebratory parade honoring the Italian allies of the United States toward the end of World War I. And it was interesting also in the gallery, folks said, well, I see the American flag, I recognize the Red Cross flag, and what is this other flag? If you didn't come up and see Italian Day, and like, well, the colors are right, but what is that thing lingering in the center? That is the flag of the Kingdom of Italy, as it would have appeared in 1918 with the arms of the royal family of Savoy in the center. Obviously, the Republic of Italy no longer has that shield in the center, so it's just the familiar tricolor, red, white, and green. All right, now we're getting into the goods. Childe Hassam, an American impressionist, an artist who was among those responsible for sort of introducing Americans to the concept of Impressionism, especially for Americans who were not traveling as he and his wife did to the continent, going to France, which he spent from his younger years up until his mature adulthood, introducing the concept of Impressionism to the United States, and then developing in what we call American Impressionism as sort of its own unique animal. And I think Childe Hassam, as an artist, really looked forward to American art standing on its own 2 feet, not necessarily being beholden to their European counterparts, but developing something that was tied to the place in which our country was born and grew. And one of the things he celebrates in this flag series is the streets of New York City and particularly Fifth Avenue. And there's a wonderful quote that he had about the Champs-Élysées in Paris is not more deserving than Fifth Avenue of being immortalized in paint. And there is a lot of immortalizing, but the immortalizing is, of course, because it's impressionism. It is open. It's poetic. It does not immediately spell out everything for us of what it is that we are looking at. But as I mentioned, the pleasure of this painting is truly to be found in looking closely at its surface texture, which is flattened even in this detail. But you can probably get a sense of some of those sort of impasto buildup you see in the center portion. I should say, in the street. It's on the left-hand side of your screen. You see these very staccato, white, loaded brushstrokes, and then there are these bold cobalt blue, equally staccato strokes that we discussed in the gallery. Is this a traffic jam? Are these a sea of umbrellas? And we agreed that probably it is the traffic jam, just because if we go back to our main view, we're looking sort of down the open canyon of Fifth Avenue, and that central area we would always anticipate being filled by automobiles as opposed to a flood of people with their umbrellas to shield them from a rainy sky. And I was very impressed that our eagle-eyed in-person attendees immediately noticed that the folks that we can see on the right-hand side, the right-hand corner, none of them have umbrellas. And someone pointed out, a lady named Pamela, who is a frequent visitor to the museum, she noted that she could tell not only do they not have umbrellas, even though it seems to be raining, she said it must be a cold rain. And she said, I can see they're wearing overcoats. It's not just dresses. Like the men are in hats. Of course, it's 1918. You expect men to be wearing hats. But she said, it looks like they have long coats on over what it is they're wearing. Which, when I think of May, especially in the rather chilly temperatures we're finding ourselves today in February of 2026, I'm thinking of like a nice warm spring rain. And she immediately pointed out that maybe not. Maybe it's a bit one of those chilly late spring rains that we're seeing here. Nonetheless, rain seems to have stopped because we don't see any umbrellas in that group over on the right-hand side. We spent a little bit of time in discussion about whether there is the figure of a person at the extreme left-hand edge here. You might be able to make out there are sort of two parallel, horizontal, pale blue brushstrokes. There's below that sort of a circular blob of blue, and then an irregular vertical rectangle of blue that ends kind of in a dribble. And a few of the folks who are with us in the gallery argued that from their perspective that is another person standing on the opposite side of the street from the people over on the right-hand side. I will be honest and say that does not resolve in my mind's eye as a human figure. I'm not sure exactly what is intended by those brushstrokes. In the gallery, I was actually sitting in a chair very close to that corner of the painting. So, I'm peering at it looking like this, where I could really see like the dribbling effect of the tail end of that oil paint going down. And one of the things that struck me, even if I don't see a person, is that is the corner of this painting where you can see bare canvas, what appears to be bare canvas, that there is the least amount of accretion of paint in that particular area of the canvas, which is in great contrast to other areas where there's so much texture rising up off the surface. And yet that is also the corner where he has signed and dated this. So of course he wants us to notice that and see that corner. It's by no means a forgotten corner of the painting. And we did disagree in the group, in the gallery, and you're welcome to weigh in about where he wants our eye to go first. Or does he have something in mind for where our eye would go first? Some folks said that their gaze was immediately pulled by the Italian flag, which is sort of viewed most fully. The American flag seems to be, slightly folding in on itself. Others said because of the sort of perspective down this canyon of Fifth Avenue, that their eye was pulled toward that horizon, even though you don't really find anything there. And a gentleman who had not come to Art in Focus, which is always a pleasure to meet someone new, he said that, he immediately got the sense that Childe Hassam didn't want us to look at anything in particular, that he wants your eye to wander and to notice and have things come out at you. And I think, especially for an artist we describe with the term impressionist, that is absolutely true. In many ways, you could say that these paintings are an opportunity for him to explore light and color and reflection. This happens to be a good, I was about to say a good canvas for him. It's a good subject to embrace what he's interested in, as opposed to being focused on describing it for our benefit. So I would agree that I don't think that he necessarily, the painter, assumes that we will have any particular way of moving around the picture. That said, as we sat in a group in front of it, with then our perspective being lowered, we're not standing, we are seated, we started discussing what is this green element that is vertical, that is really kind of dead center in the bottom of the painting's composition. So we have folks who are walking along a sidewalk, the lower right, maybe wearing their winter coats, no umbrellas. We have what could be the traffic jam in sort of the left-hand side. We have flags indistinctly on the far side of the street. And then there's this sort of green vertical with what looks like dark blue, smaller vertical brushstrokes on top. We discussed a couple possibilities, one being that this is the entrance to the subway. Another, a discussion of whether this could be some form of tram or bus. And I admitted that what it put me in mind of, even as though I was immediately aware that I don't think that makes sense, it made me think of the kind of double-decker buses you see in London where there are people on top, except I don't think any such double-decker bus existed and in green in New York in 1918. So the general consensus led toward the subway entrance. Although I do note there are brush strokes. If you follow from that green sort of rectangular area, you follow that down to the bottom edge of the canvas, there would appear to be these reflections in the wet surface that to me suggests more of sort of a structure than as I'm envisioning a subway entrance. But as I discussed with our group, if we were really trying to investigate this, well, what would we do? We would find photographs from 1918 and we would look at what kind of structures were on Fifth Avenue at that time. And maybe we would see something that would mimic the shape and all would be revealed to us. Because as we say of most objects, you know, Childe Hassam is painting for fellow Americans of 1918. A lot of this, he is assuming that it is a picture that a world they will recognize. And sometimes there are aspects of their world that in just over a century might have slightly altered and don't read in the same way as they might have then. But that is part of the fun of looking at a painting like this with a group, as you hear two ladies argue about, well, is that a person over at the left or isn't it? Is that a bus or is it a tram or is it a subway entrance? And that too is part of the artist's project. I'm always reminding my students that, you know, an artist wants you to pay attention and they would like you to keep looking. You know, they want to keep your attention and keep you engaged and keep you coming back. And one of our frequent contributors, Pat, she pointed out that she had read about encouraging people to try to spend 15 minutes in front of an artwork in a museum and that she has been challenging herself to do this. And she commented that her husband already thought she moved slow enough in museums and now she's trying to go even slower. And that is one of the things this Art in Focus program just gives us an opportunity and a reason to do. Because even though I now for just about a month have had a wonderful experience to see this painting every day when I walk into the gallery, I can go up to it and look at it. That doesn't mean that I've sat down for a half an hour and looked at it consecutively as I did this morning. So I'm always just saying I'm grateful for the opportunity that the Art in Focus program provides. And I will just remind all of you that you can make your own mini Art in Focus. Take a friend, go to a gallery, sit, talk about something. Even more fun if you can find something that you don't agree on. You never know. Of course, the bottom edge of the painting is not the only interesting section. One of the things I was pointing out, if for a visitor to the gallery or someone who reads our looks at our website, we've posted all of the wall labels on our website. We tried to solicit faculty from elsewhere at the university to write their own responses, reflections on different artworks, particularly ones that might have to do with a particular era of American history, a particular discipline, where they could just contribute something more than we in the museum would be able to offer. And we have marked those in the gallery with a little star. It looks like a very, one of those barn stars that are very show up on New England houses. And Philip Eliasoff, who is a professor of art history here at Fairfield, he had written a wonderfully evocative response to this painting. And I told the group that somehow in, several years of having access to this very high resolution image, it wasn't until I read Philip's response that I really noticed the plane in the sky. That is my failure and oversight, which I am now confessing into the void. And it is a biplane, so that very characteristic early 20th century plane. And somehow it had just escaped my attention. And of course, there's another Italian flag lingering up there at the top edge of the canyon, we could say. But the sky, as you look at it, is just so alive with his brushstrokes, many of which are very much loaded with paint. And when you see it in person, directly below and to the left of the Italian flag, I mean, that is a thick, chunky area of paint. And one thing that we discussed together in the gallery is that if we're thinking about weather, we talked about time of day, and someone said, maybe late afternoon. Someone said very securely 2:15 p.m. I don't know if he had evidence for that. But one thing we noticed is that it does seem to have rained, but it doesn't seem to be raining. The sky seems to be lightening. You can see much bright whiter clouds in the higher level. We already noted people don't have their umbrellas. And yet everything is so damp and reflective. It's giving Childe Hassam so much fun to play with on the ground level. And the same is really true in what he's doing in the sky. Oh, I forgot I put this in here. I mentioned that there are, I have been saying there are 30 flag series paintings. Someone fact checked me in our group session and said, in fact, there are 29, so we didn't quite reach 30. And they are in museums all around the United States. I mentioned the White House has one. They belong to the National Gallery, to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I'm sure if you are in private hands. The one that belongs to Art Bridges came from Childe Hassam's estate, and it was gifted to the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and they deaccessioned it and turned it over to an art gallery. And that is how Art Bridges acquired it in 2018, for those of you who might be wondering how this painting reached where it reached. And now, as I mentioned, is generously on loan to Fairfield through July of this year. So you have a little more time to get in there and see it. If anyone has any responses or reflections or remembers seeing another Childe Hassam flag painting, please feel free to share. If you have read the foreword to the brochure for this exhibition, the university president, Dr. Mark Nemec, he remembered seeing the flag show. There was one that was done in, I believe, 1988. That was at the one of the major museums in Los Angeles, and he remembered having seen it there. I mean, his paintings make a very tactile response when you're standing in front of them. And we did also discuss, because when you see something in a museum, you're seeing it in context of other things. I'm going to go back to that very first image. We were seated in the area that you see in this photograph. So one of the things that visitors were pointing out was that between the Childe Hassam on the left and the painting immediately to its right by the artist N.C. Wyeth, they're both from 1918. And yet so much is different in how those two artists look at the world and treat their paint. And see, you might not be able to make it out, but there is a something lying on the bench, and that is in fact the cover. It's a Red Cross magazine from 1918. Wyeth's painting was created to be the cover of Red Cross magazine, and we managed to get a copy of that off of eBay, which is on the couch there. And there is another painting on the right that is a view of Washington Bridge by the artist Ernest Lawson. Also very heavy on the impasto, but there we were using it as a contrast in terms of color decisions. How much warmer and filled with greens and yellows Lawson's painting is, and then we turn back to the very cool toned painting by Childe Hassam, which one of our guests referred to as the sky has been whitewashed. She said it's very gauzy, it's ephemeral. And someone else asked about sort of the idea of Childe Hassam as constructing his scenes. And what we know of his painting process, you might have been familiar with the idea of impressionists like Claude Monet going out into, sitting in front of the great cathedrals or in front of his haystack with the intent of capturing the minute changes of light and shadow and color as time and weather change. One of the things that this artist found, as did others who worked in urban environments, it's pretty hard to set up your easel for long periods, like right in the center of Fifth Avenue. Like, I don't really think the New York City police would be totally thrilled. I mean, it's possible that our point of view here is, from the edge of a curb, but Hassam had to sort of adapt his practice. He would go out into the street, make lots of studies and small sketches, and he would bring them back into his studio nearby to construct the painting in its full size. So there's that sense of it, as of course it's impressionist, being of the moment. We have captured this flickering, very fleeting moment as these people are going to proceed down the sidewalk and the cars will move away, the air and the light will change. And yet at the same time, we know this is something that he would have been taking time to paint very carefully in his studio nearby. And since the phrase I already said about this being sort of a view down a canyon, that was one of the visitors had used that term. It is worth noticing that, the year is 1918 and these buildings are not as tall as they would be now. Like I'm looking on the left-hand side of the painting as it goes down into the distance. Many of those buildings at that time were 5 or 6 stories tall, where today we would find them much, much higher. So we talked about how it would be interesting to see a revised celebration of views of Fifth Avenue be decked with flags in 2026. How would the physical environment be different than what Childe Hassam is celebrating in 1918? So those are a few of the thoughts that visitors to the museum have shared about this painting that I have had in looking at it. It has been my great pleasure in just the past month, and I'm looking forward to having many more months to spend with it. If you have any comments or responses to it, feel free to drop those in the chat. But you can also, if you have questions about the painting, send them directly to us, museum@fairfield.edu. And if you visit the Fairfield University website and go to the museum, you can access all of our materials for the show are available online. So you can download a copy of our exhibition brochure. You can watch the excellent opening night lecture by Dr. Aaron Weinstein, a member of the Department of Politics here at Fairfield, who spoke about the American flag as a form of civil religion. And we will continue updating that YouTube playlist with additional events as they exist. And finally, for those of you who might be watching live, I will just point out that we have a lecture that will be live streamed this evening at 5:30, same time, same place. And that will be Dr. Sarah Churchill, who is adjunct faculty of art history, and she's going to be speaking about the role of photography in advancing the cause of Black liberation in American art in the 20th century. That will be 5:30 this evening, broadcast right here. But if you are around and in person, that will be in the black box inside the Quick Center for the Arts here at Fairfield. So we hope you will have a chance to come and see For Which It Stands while it is with us through July of 2026. As you know, we are free and open to the public. So if you know people who live in the tri-state area, please let them know they should come and check out the show. And we will look forward to seeing you at the next Art in Focus.